Welcome to another episode of Empower Apps. I'm your host, Leo Dion. Today I'm joined once again with five-timer Donny Wals. Donny, thank you for coming back. It's been a while.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me back. Always a pleasure to be on.
Before we begin, what have you been up to lately?
Oh, I've been up to a bunch of things since the last time we spoke. I don't remember exactly when I was on last time, but basically last year I didn't do too much of conferencing. I was just working on client work, my apps, my blog, and everything. And then this year came around, and everything was different with AI suddenly eating a lot of traffic. So I decided to double down on my workout tracking app, which I've been working on a lot. It's called Magazine. Um, I've been doing just more of client work. I've updated my Swift concurrency book in the meantime. And yeah, mainly a lot of trying to figure out what to do in this age of AI and how it will change the way I work, how it will change the content that I make, the content that I want to make. So been thinking about that a lot as well. It hasn't really turned into anything to create yet, um, but thinking is being done a lot.
What surprised you the most over the last year or so as far as how AI has affected you?
It's been something that was, I think, on my mind probably somewhere around like late 2024, where we had Cursor and it became easier and easier to use AI. And it was still very much like not great, but you could see that this was something that a lot of very smart people were interested in. And you could see that there was going to be a use for it, right? So like at that point, I was pretty sure that it would impact the way that I work, it would impact the work that I did. I just had no idea how. And then somewhere through like 2025, I feel like things started to fade a little bit. People seemed to sort of almost lose interest. We were just sort of resuming work as normal, and we had these cool tools, but like real developers wouldn't use it. You know what I mean? So everyone was like, "Oh, it's not great. It doesn't do anything exactly the way I want it to." But then, um, I was pretty comfortable during that time, and then suddenly, like late 2025, all these new models came out, and we didn't just have Cursor as a harness. We also had Claude Code. We also had Codex, and all of a sudden, almost overnight, like I felt like it happened like over Christmas, over the New Year's break. Like a lot of people were sort of off talking to friends and family, and we all came back mid-January, and suddenly nobody wanted to write code anymore. At least not like in my environment. Everyone's like, okay, I'm not writing code. I'm going to prompt it. I'm going to use agents because now an agent can work on my full project, and it might not be perfect code, but it's good enough to keep it. And it's almost like just like that. It was a long time coming. It almost felt like it might never happen, and then suddenly it just happened. Like agentic coding was there. Nobody wanted to read blogs anymore. Nobody wanted to read books anymore. Nobody wanted to learn anything anymore other than how do I prompt this thing efficiently, and how do I just make it magically do what I want. And so the way it impacted me was it changed the way that I work, and it's really made the blog take a hit. It's really made the books take a hit. It's really hard to sell workshops now to companies because they're like nobody seems, especially for the first like 5 6 months of the year, nobody seems very interested anymore in like deeply learning something. Everybody just wants to get the agent to do stuff.
Do you think we're going to see a rebound at some point? Because I mean, at some point, you do kind of have to know how this stuff works behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure about that. Like in a way, I think so. It actually feels like the magic has worn off over the past couple months, and a lot of people are tired of not writing code, tired of this crazy new multitasking that we're all having to do. Like we're all being encouraged by companies, by managers, by CTOs to spend tokens, right? And to make sure that
Well, there's
we
been a lot of pullback from that,
it's been
in the
starting
last
to
couple of
happen. Yeah, I was
yeah.
about to say like the beginning of the year was like do as much as you can with AI, and we were all very much almost forced to try and almost like multitask into like the point where it seemed like higher ups and enthusiasts were almost trying to spend like an hour in the morning to tell like as much agents as possible to perform as many tasks as they possibly could. And then you would go off and do other stuff, and you'd come back in the afternoon and you would just click approve on a bunch of PRs. And the reality has been that that's not the way it works, right? Like, I think more and more people are just seeing, like, okay, we're producing more PRs, but reviewing them is more tedious, it's harder, it takes longer if we want to do it correctly. We have feedback, we have suggestions, but whoever put up the PR doesn't really know how to properly implement the feedback because they didn't really write all of the code in the first place. And so in the end, we're producing more, but we're not always shipping faster. We're just having more PR sit in review for longer. I think that's the reality for a lot of what I'm seeing, at least, and what I'm hearing as well.
That makes a lot of sense, especially in a big company. Like you need to have human eyes on stuff.
Absolutely. And I actually read a study as well, where for that particular company that they examined, um, an AI assisted PR would sit in non reviewed state, like waiting for review state, like 2 to 3 times longer than other PRs. People would be afraid to post feedback because that would essentially make them own that feedback. So it's like, oh, I don't agree with the architecture here. And they were afraid that whoever made the PR didn't fully support the architecture. So they'd be like, okay, well, tell me how to do it, or like help me prompt the agent how to do it. So they would suddenly become part owner of that PR. But then once they did sort of run through the PRs that were made by humans and they had to start reviewing the AI PRs, they would spend less time reviewing the PR because of complexity, because of just the perceived, how did they put that? They didn't perceive that the writer put so much effort in. And so they weren't compelled to put in the same effort that they would for a human written PR. Um, yeah, it was quite interesting to read that, especially because I would have expected the review itself to take longer. But it seems like once for that company, they would put themselves to actually reviewing it. They actually didn't really care about the PR so much, so they just approved it. And like, if there's a bug, we'll have the agent fix it because it's all AI code anyway. Who gives a crap? It's quite interesting.
I mean, a few thoughts from me is like, shouldn't we be doing smaller PRs then? So that way they're easier to manage and review.
I mean, that probably helps because the average PR made by an agent is larger than a human PR. I just wonder, like, at what point, if you're right insistent on using agents for everything, and you've given it a task, and that task should, in theory, produce a manageable PR. I wonder how compelled people would be to look at the code the agent made, see that it implemented the feature, it didn't refactor half the code base, so it's probably fine. I'm not sure like how compelled people are to then, but okay, this is kind of big. Let's split that up into per screen or per like first the network call, then the UI, or however you might have done that as a person writing this. And that's also an interesting. Um, I'm not even sure who said it or where I read this, but I didn't come up with this at least. The beauty of a human writing code is that the human at some point goes, "Wait, should I be doing this?" An agent doesn't do that. An agent just goes. Like, I have a task, I'm going to go do it. Whereas as a human, when you're working on something, at some point, you just kind of feel like the vibes are not there. You're coding, it's like, this feels like too much work. This feels like it's getting out of hand. This feels like it wasn't scoped properly. And you stop working and you go back to your manager or whatever, and you go like, okay, maybe this ticket needs to be 2 or 3 tickets. I can work on them in parallel, but we're going to make 3 PRs out of this because it's too much otherwise.
The way, okay, like I don't know how you've been doing, Maxine, but like the way I've been doing stuff is kind of like I'll have a main branch, I'll have the version I'm releasing, and then I'll have features, and if those features need to be split up, I'll split those up. And then like basically everything I ever tell Claude to do is its own PR. And that way it's all manageable and easy for me to like look at the PR, be like it. And quite frankly, like I think one of the things we're afraid of, but we shouldn't be, especially now, is ripping out code that is excessive. I forgot which library I had been working on, but I just wanted something simple, and it gave me like fallback retries, networking caching, all this crap that was just like, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but it's crap I have to maintain and I have to be responsible for. And it's like we should be we should be okay with saying no to too much code from a agent.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've been dealing with that myself in two ways. One is I do the same thing you do. Every prompt basically becomes a PR. Maybe there's a follow-up prompt to clean something up, but generally speaking, one task is one PR. I have agents working in work trees, so I can have multiple in parallel. And then before I tell it to make a PR, I always tell it to do a review where it will scrutinize every line of code that it added as, is this absolutely necessary to achieve the goal? And basically encouraging it to do the same result with less code. I always ask it, like, is there anything in there for backwards compatibility? If so, rip it out because you're
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I get that a lot. Like I've got libraries that are in beta, and it's like, oh, you sure this is okay? Like, no, I don't care. Like, yeah.
exactly. So it's like, and sometimes I have to point it to like compare this to main because we're like 5 commits deep and like maybe multiple PRs stacked on top of each other. So it's like, oh, but you already had this feature and we're changing it now, so maybe it's not a user. It's like, no, compare to main. If it's not on main, it doesn't exist, and you're fine to break everything and anything you want. If there's anything I want preserved, I will let you know.
Have you tried to put any of this guidance in like a Claude MD or Agents MD file?
It's in the agents file. I find that most of the time it works okay. The problem is that it becomes sort of like a blanket thing, where if I do want backwards compatibility, I have to be explicit about it. So I'm always trying to balance like how annoying is it to pull it back on this, and how annoying is it if it's sort of too strict with this rule, or if right. So that's sort of a trade-off that I always have to that I'm always trying to make.
What kind of so let's take one step back. What are you using now for your energetic coding, and what are you using as far as managing PRs, reviewing PRs, etc.?
So I'm using Cursor. It's one that I started using early on. I've always liked it. I like that it allows me to switch models really easily, and not just the two like big players, but like any model. And actually, like Composer, which is Cursor's own model, is pretty good nowadays. It's all I need, and it's like super cheap compared to like the API usage for ChatGPT or Claude. I mean, the plan itself is really expensive. Like I'm on a $200 plan, but I never run out of tokens. Like on a $20 one, I used to run out of tokens, but I haven't tried it with only Composer because Cursor like subsidizes usage of their own model, obviously, heavily. If you use ChatGPT through Cursor, it's quite expensive because you're paying API pricing. So it's a bit of a trade-off, but it's been working really well for me. I've been using it for, I think, exclusively for like 6 months now. And for my PRs, I'm still just reviewing them on GitHub. I am somewhat like changing the way I look at the code. I mainly kind of spot check it for like, is this what I would expect versus is this what I would have written myself, which is not always been great. I mainly do this on Magazine, by the way. On client work, I'm still a lot more scrutinizing, but Magazine is like my playground essentially, where I just want to see how far I can push this. So just it's different ways of working. Basically, like Magazine is almost like I've almost blind merged PRs, but I'm still not confident enough to do that because almost every time there's a subtle bug.
You're pretty good with like, I don't know, SwiftData. You've written books about core data. You've written books about certain libraries that involve reacting to information, which we won't name. Uh, you're quite experienced in certain APIs and not experienced in some. When it comes to Maxine's work, are there particular areas where like, yeah, I don't really know how this works, and I'm just gonna let Cursor have its way? Like, what would be an example?
So I had never done a watch app before, and so I basically just told it like, make me a watch app. Here's what it needs to do, and like it did a decent job of setting up like all the essentials, mainly communicating with the phone. Because like I was reading it, I was looking at the sample, I was like, okay, there's a lot of work.
Did you try my library for watch communication?
I did not know.
Okay, we'll
I
talk about Sundial
We'll
Kit
talk about that.
afterwards.
We'll
Okay.
talk about that. I might want to integrate that. But like I just told it like, hey, make me this. It needs to communicate that, and it just gave me a bunch of code. And I think the main part that I sort of went back and forth with was like, how do we communicate data? Right? Like, do we use structs? Do we just send SwiftData objects? Do we send like encoded messages that aren't like they're strings or whatever? Like it came up with a bunch of ideas, and we ended up deciding that structs was the way to go. So the only place that touches my actual database is the phone, the watch, live activities, widgets, app intents. They all talk to snapshots. So basically, every time the user does a workout, I generate a snapshot of it that exists on the file system, only the parts that would be needed by other parts. And if, for example, an app intent wants to communicate back to the watch or to the phone, it will make a snapshot. Same for the watch. It will send like a specific message to the phone app. The phone app then processes it, updates the database, and sends information back to the watch. The watch updates its UI. And like I had never done that before. I figured it would be a lot of work, and I wanted it fast so that I could start testing. And it's like I think it took like 4 hours for me to have it on my watch, on my phone, and to go to the gym and actually have a first version to test.
Tell the story you had about the app crashing mid workout, because that was pretty good.
A nice thing about Cursor also is that they have a web interface, right? That sort of was a reason that I liked it so much as well. And as I was testing the I don't remember which particular feature I was testing, but I was testing the app, and I did something, and it crashed. And I tried it again, and I could get it to crash the second time. So okay, perfect. I have reproduction steps. So I just went to cursor.com, fired off an agent. I in detail described what I did in the app, and that it crashed. And luckily, I was on a test flight build. So as I was typing that, I got an email from test flight saying a user submitted feedback. So I had a crash report, and I just copied that over, attached it to my prompt. I was like, here's everything that I did. Here's the crash report. Go figure it out. And the funny thing is that Cursor runs on Linux, so it wasn't able to build my iOS app. So it basically just completely went by vibes. It was just like, okay, here's what the user told me. Here's probably what went wrong. And I got back home, and a PR was sitting there waiting for me. Bitrise had run a build. It had run my tests. It was all green. It was all good. And all I needed to do was install it on my device, check that the crash was resolved, and it actually worked. There were a few like minor nitpicks that I wanted to fix in the code, but yeah, it was pretty good. Especially because I was so in the moment, like no thinking of like, oh, what did I do exactly? No first writing a crash report like on my phone and then forgetting it when I got home. Like I have that all the time, right? I write something down in a note. I go home after the gym, kids are there, kids need to be picked up, whatever, and I forget all about that note until I found my next bug in the gym. I see like, oh crap, I forgot about that one thing. So sending it immediately to an agent and having a PR to review was, yeah, that was really a very cool moment for me to be like, okay, so here's how we could be working on some of these things.
Do they have Swift? So Cursor has like you can run stuff on the web. Can it run Swift?
I think it should be able to install and run Swift. Like you can build your own
Okay.
containers. So if I had made all of this into packages,
Claude Code doesn't have that, so like you can't even run Swift. So I am one who has also on occasion coded on my phone by
yeah,
going into the Claude app and telling it to create a PR for something. I just remembered. So I totally
yeah,
get it. But like every time I've tried to get Swift to work, it's like, no, we can't install Swift on the server. It's like, or you can't do like a Docker container. It's pretty limited right now.
yeah. I think Cursor does allow you to configure containers, but they launched an iOS app like 2 or 3 days ago, and I haven't tried it yet, but the app can actually connect to your computer, and then
Right,
you can run
right.
agents
That you
on
could
your
do that.
computer,
Right.
which is really nice. I've been running a setup with a Mac Mini for basically just to try it, where I can just SSH into my Mac Mini at home, and then instead of using the Cursor website, I can just fire off a Cursor agent on the Mac Mini I have at home, which is also quite nice because then I have the simulator. And actually, just last weekend, I was at a festival and they didn't have offline access for their timetable thing, and the internet was like non-existent there. So when I got back to my hotel, I told uh, Cursor on the Mac Mini to make me an app based on the website. I just gave the URL of the timetable, and since like I wouldn't be able to install it because I was not with my MacBook at that time, I did have it close, but I wasn't. I was at the breakfast thing, so I told her that I was like, okay, take me screenshots of every state of the app, and put them on the GitHub README, make me a repo and everything, put the screenshots there, built me the app, and then basically just on those screenshots, I iterated for a bit. I was like, okay, this needs to change, that needs to change.
Wait, where
Um,
were you when you were doing this?
I was having breakfast with my wife at the hotel. We were talking about how annoying it was that we couldn't do the timetable the day before.
What did
So we just
Mrs.
looked.
Walls think about this?
She
Like,
thought it was amazing. Like she was
oh,
so happy,
okay.
but she was very annoyed, like I was, with the lack of timetable at at like the
Right, right.
venue itself. So we were
Yes.
just trying to figure out like how should this thing work, and just talking to the agent. And then we got back to the hotel room, plug in our phones, install the app, and we used it for the next 2 days. It was amazing. And I haven't even seen the code. Like I didn't even check anything. Just as long as it worked, installed on my phone, solved my problem, I was happy.
Yeah, I have a few Mac Minis. I need to like do that and take advantage of that. I haven't gotten to that part yet, but that makes total sense. I wanted to hop back and talk about like architecture. Is there anything you're changing as far as your architecture and your let's talk Mac scene, but also let's talk your other job stuff. Is there a way you're changing the way you're architecting your apps in any way?
Not necessarily. I'm mostly less concerned about repetitive code, like and boring stuff. Like when I would write code by hand, I would be writing the same kind of thing like over and over, and it's like 99% the same, but it's slightly different. I would start thinking about like how do I abstract that? Like how do I make it so that I don't have to repeat this little dance every single time? And I think more often than not, that would actually lead to like clever code where it's like it's 99% the same, so you still have to account for the differences, but most things are the same, so you can come up with something with generics and do smart stuff. And
I get it now.
almost
Okay.
always that sort of bites you in the end. And I do like that when I tell an agent to do the boring thing, it will just do it. And yes, there is some repetitive pieces of code, but it's repetitive not because it's doing the same thing every single time. It's just repetitive because that's just the way it is.
I think that's like one of those over optimization things that developers do. We hear don't repeat yourself, the dry method. And we like, oh, I think it's been overdone because, like, I think until you have like several copies of something, it's not worth refactoring into like you said, being clever with generics and protocols and stuff. I was just gonna say it also depends if you're coding for an app or coding for developers too.
When something is the same because it's doing literally the exact same thing over and over again, or if it's the same just because it happens to do the same thing, if you know what I mean.
Yep, I know exactly what you mean.
Like decoding JSON, it feels so repetitive. Like it's the same thing over and over and over. And every time you do it by hand, it's like it's screaming for an abstraction. Whereas, like, when you're done and like 6 months go by, probably all of these objects will have diverged in subtle ways, and like they're not exactly the same. And so even though like the initial writing was incredibly boring and repetitive, it wasn't like you did the same thing over and over again. It's just it was kind of the same thing. Um, so yeah, I like that like an agent doesn't care about that. It'll just do whatever you told it to, and it doesn't care about abstractions. The downside, on the other hand, is that it doesn't realize when an abstraction would be a good idea. So for example, with Magazine, I have a lot of places where I show weights and I convert from pounds to kilograms. Actually, the other way around. I store everything in kilograms and sometimes I present pounds for the US folks. And
The wrong way. Anyways, go ahead.
the wrong way, yeah. There's just like a couple places where like we have to like show labels for things. And an AI will just happily reinvent the same helper or like reinvent the same string interpolation every single time. Where I do have to tell it like, hey, look, you know what we really need? We need a unified way to just ask the weight data object for a display weight and then use that everywhere instead of figuring out how to display it locally every single time.
It seems like, I mean, you can have both issues with the agent where it over abstracts as well. And I think the issue with repeating usually is just a simple context window issue of like there's just so much code that it's like hard, it's like difficult for it to even know that that existing code already exists somewhere in your app. So yeah, that's usually the case with repeating code is like you need somewhere Claude MD or whatever that says, hey, if you ever need to do this, this is what you need to do and save it in the memory somewhere.
I think you're touching on a really interesting point there as well, where it's possibly even more important than before to kind of know your way around the code base that you're working on. Because the better you are at telling the agent examples of what you've done before, the better the output's going to be. Because if you just let it run freely, it might never discover that you've done the exact same thing mostly or solved the exact same problem before. And so it will come up with its own way to do it. And it might not be the right way. And then nudging it to do it the right way without telling it how it was done before is really frustrating. So if you can just tell it like, hey, look at this file. We have helpers for all the weight stuff. If there's anything missing, add a new function using the exact same sort of API styling and make sure that you never, ever, ever like do inline conversion of weights. If you can add that to your agent file or to your prompt, if it's not relevant enough for the entire file, then yeah, that's great. And it's going to do a much, much better job.
Isn't there like a measurements API that Apple provides?
There
Was it
is, yes.
was it using that or was it doing its own or what exactly was
So
going on?
it's basically because I wasn't using measurements, I started building this thing without knowing that it existed. So I just have like a multiplier for kilograms to pounds, and that's it. It's
We
super
need that.
easy.
Yeah, but we need that practical measurements book in the next year or two.
I guess so. I guess so. I should
I
probably
guess
learn the framework.
it'd be like a pamphlet, but still, it wouldn't be too bad.
I mean, just knowing how to store stuff and how to normalize it in general is a really good idea. Like storing currency and stuff. I've seen so
Right.
many people mess that up.
Um, let's touch upon we kind of mentioned a few things. What are some tips you have for people who are just getting into agentic coding? Like I say, like context window management is still, I think, important in some ways. I think yeah, just being able to document stuff properly so it knows how things work. What are some
Yes.
other tips you might have?
So just I just want to reiterate like the documenting, like having an agents file or a Claude MD or I think Gemini uses Gemini.md or whatever your agent of choosing uses. Make sure you have one of those. It helps your agent navigate your code base. Make sure that it contains like the important parts, like tell it like where to find certain things. And a nice trick that you can actually use is you can also nest them. So you can have an agent's MD file at your root or a Claude MD. And then if you have your folder structure, like for example, like your models, your networking, your UI, and then per like in UI you have features. Every folder can have its own agent's MD or its own Claude MD.
Yep. You could also have like a .claude folder in the root, for instance. I don't know how the other ones do it, where you can provide even more general documentation to guide the agent.
Exactly. A cursor has something similar as well. But just the fact that you can like stack them and then like do progressive disclosure is really useful because that means that you can keep your root agent's file relatively small and then the agent can just discover what it needs to find as it goes. Great way to manage your context window. Also, I have a sort of file that my agent has to maintain on its own, which I call agent notes. So in my agent's file, I tell it that it must, for every correction that I make, or every time I tell it to always or never do something, it must add a line to agent notes where it will teach itself what to do, and then it loads that as rules for
I
the next
like
time.
that. I like that a lot. Do you keep
Because
that
like
file like through the
yes,
whole
so
process? Do you ever like when you merge it like we can get into work trees later, but then how do you deal with like merge conflicts with that or anything like that?
everything it writes down is valid. So if there's a merge conflict, you just resolve it by keeping both changes, because it never changes an existing line. It's just like appending. So also like conflicts, I don't think I've ever had an actual conflict on it because Git will figure out like nothing changed the same line. It's just everybody adding stuff. But then like every once in a while I look at it and I go like, okay, so there's a bunch of stuff there, and I'll just tell the agent like, okay, find me like the general lessons in there, find me the overarching rules, and update your agent's file so that your workflow now matches that. And then like every month or so, like I end up with a clean agent notes, and it's so much better than trying to remember because sometimes you have a session where you have to correct it like 10 times on the exact same thing, and it feels so important to add to your agent's file, but it turns out it was just the agent having a bad day and it never again messes that one thing up. And other times it feels like it's not such a big deal, but you've corrected the agent like 10 times over the course of a month and it was always like a small, tiny thing. But then you see like the same thing in the agent notes file, like or variations of it. It's like, oh, hold on. I'm actually very often telling it to do something in a specific way. So maybe we should, you know, make sure that we generalize a nice rule out of this so that it always does it the right way.
So do you ever go through it and like clean it, not clean it up, but you know what I mean? Like, cause it's just going to grow continually. Do you ever like you just keep them all in there? Like it's going to end up getting big pretty quick.
Yeah, so every once in a while, I'll tell the agent to go through it and then update the agent's file. And in the beginning, it got really big every single time. And as time goes on, it gets smarter about what I want and the way I work. So now it adds maybe 2 lines in a month, and almost always those are just like one-time things where the agent was just having a bad day, or sometimes even like I look back at those and like, oh yeah, I was really not setting the agent up for success. I think on that day, like I was just very vague and very like changing my mind all the time, trying to work with like an 80% full context window. Like, of course you're going to get bad results, and then I'll just sort of delete those lines by myself. Like, okay, fine, we don't want this. Another one that I use that's also like a self-learning thing is a skill called Grill with Docs. It comes from a skill called Grill Me, and now it's Grill with Docs. So what it does is every time you prompt it, the grill part of it is actually like really basic. It basically says, analyze what I say, scrutinize every part of it, keep asking questions until we mutually agree on what the feature actually is. Do not make assumption, ask a question for literally everything you want to do. And it's quite tedious in the beginning, especially because it'll ask you like the dumbest things. But in a way that it feels dumb to you, but at the same time, it's like, okay, so you're going to assume that when I said move the button to the top, you assumed that you meant set y to 0, which might not have been true if I flipped the coordinate system, or I might have meant to move it to 20 points or whatever. So it'll ask, like, what do you mean by top? What do you mean by this? And so when it was just a grill me doc, it would do that every single time. Now, the guy that wrote it introduced a new skill called Grill with Docs, and that looks for a file called context.md. And as it asks these questions, it will find out like what is the specific terminology that you use for your app. What is the specific way that you refer to things in your natural language? What is it like? What's the main color in your app? And you say use the main color, it has to go and find a variable called main color every time. So when it finds things like that, it goes like, okay, let's add that to context.md. And so context MD then becomes part of what Grow with Docs loads as it starts deciding what the feature is. And like as time goes by, it becomes smarter and smarter and smarter, and it understands you and your app and your field of business much better. And so I use that paired with plan mode. So basically, it's like I go to plan mode in Cursor. I use Grow with Docs. I tell it what I want. I get a bunch of questions, and sometimes it's really smart about it. It's like just the other day, I told it when I finish the last set on my watch, and I log the set, and I have nothing else to log in my plan, it will suggest me to end the workout. I don't want that. I want it to allow me to add another set. And then like it was like, you know what? You actually have this flow throughout the watch where you planned 3 sets of an exercise, you press next, 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 and then you go into the next exercise immediately. Don't you want a step there as well so that you can add another set? It's like, wow, I didn't actually think of that because it never annoyed me, but you're absolutely right. So that's, yeah, it's for those kinds of things. It's really, really good because it becomes that annoying developer in the sprint planning that asks like a question for every single sentence in a ticket. But in the end, they're the ones that ship without no bugs. They're the ones that just ship exactly what was meant to be shipped because they didn't assume anything. And like 90% of the time, the assumption is correct, right? So the grill scale basically tells you like, I would recommend you do this, or I would assume this. It's like, yep, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right. But every once in a while, it's like, oh, hold up. That's a good idea, or I didn't think of that, or that's not what I meant, or that's going to break something. So highly recommend that.
You were just talking about sprints and stuff. What are you using for managing tasks or issues or sprints and stuff? Especially when it comes to Maxine.
Oh, I went through a whole cycle with that. So I first set up GitHub projects, right, where I made tickets every time. The problem was it was a lot of friction for me to make tickets because like it's the kind of app where I can test it at my desk for hours and hours and hours, but I have no idea how it works until I actually go to the gym and try to use it. Um, so I have to go out and use it to actually know like, does this truly work? Does this feel right? Does this look right in the context of, me being sweaty, me like being busy? So every time I found an issue, I would have to go to GitHub, which like on my phone, I don't know, the app's fine, but I don't like trying to navigate GitHub issues on my phone. It feels like too much
No,
effort,
no,
especially
it
if you want to
does.
write down a
Yeah,
quick line of something you didn't like.
yeah,
And
100%.
um, so I had that. It's like, okay, that might be overkill, the project setup, because like I was sort of reluctant to write things down. I would just write down in my notes app. Like, okay, I'll just copy it over later, which I never did. Then I went to Notion, which I still use every once in a while. I was like, maybe Notion is a bit more lightweight. It was pretty much the same thing as GitHub, like just as annoying. Also, the Notion mobile app isn't that great in my experience. Like it's fine, but it's not good for like doing like ticket based stuff. Then I decided that that note list that I had, like just a raycast note, was fine. So it's just everything I want to do is align in that notes thing. And when I do it, I just remove it. And basically, what I try to do is if I write down a problem now as I'm working out, I either just feed it to an agent directly and I don't even make a note. Or if it's more of a feature I want to think through, I sort of start writing a prompt that I would give to an agent. And it becomes like this whole like couple sentences on what I have in mind. And then I go back to it when I'm at my desk. And that's kind of it. Like I don't really have a ticket system or like an issue tracker.
There's like, I've talked about this before, but there's like a ton of these like agentic task tools out there, like Task Manager and Spec Kit and stuff. And I always have just been going back to just doing GitHub issues, rather because I don't like the idea of keeping a bunch of markdown files for every single issue, and doing that as far as like planning things out. And then yeah, I just use milestones and GitHub issues as far as that's concerned, and then make sure that Claude knows how to use the GitHub CLI, so it can just create the issue for me every time. And then whenever I have time to go back to it, I will.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that works. I used it on other projects. It's just for this particular one because in most of my like bug filing and reporting and coming up with features happens in the gym. It's like for some reason Notes app just works best.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, yeah. Um, One thing I wanted to mention before we switch topics that you kind of went into is with a lot of this stuff, you can't use these tools to help you with this stuff. So, like, if you're like, hey, I need a prompt, it can write the prompt for you and you can help write the prompt. If you need help creating your agents file, your context file, in a lot of these cases, these tools can help you with those items, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, like it'll be freely like, yeah, we can edit your agents.md so we know about this context file or whatever it is. It's usually pretty good about that.
Absolutely, yeah. I use it a lot for those kinds of things.
Before we close out, let's talk about APIs, dub. Where do you think, like, core data, SwiftData, where are you at with that right now?
So Maxine is all SwiftData, and I'm not hating it. Um, Mainly because like I wasn't expecting to hate it at all because it's a pretty simple app database wise. No multi-threading, no multiple access, no iCloud sync. Just it's just on a phone, local database. Model changes every once in a while. Migrations work fine. A couple things that are a little bit annoying around migrations, but once you know how they work, it's not that big of a deal. Um, Mainly like when you want to remove a property from a model and then um, move it to some other entity. Pretty vague, I know. So what I wanted to do at some point, like I had an integer, like three integers somewhere on an object, and I wanted to make those three integers parts of a new entity, and then the old entity didn't have the three numbers anymore, just one field that pointed to
This is
the new entity.
migration stuff?
Yeah, a migration.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And SwiftData cannot do that in one pass, so you need two model versions, one to
Okay.
copy and then the other one to remove the old property. In Core Data, I
Okay.
could do that in one pass. So when I ran into that, it was really annoying because I was like, how do I do this? How do I do this? I cannot do this. Okay, fine, two model versions it is. Turns out that's
Or they should,
just kind of the way I have to do it.
yeah, you think they'd have like a like I don't know if you were a SQL person, but like there's always the idea of a temporary table. Like you'd think there'd be a way to script something like that up.
Yeah. And Core Data does that, right? Core Data gives you old context and new context. So you can query anything you had in your old database, and you can query anything you have in your new one, and you can like link stuff together. Uh, SwiftData gives you old context and new context, but not in the same function, so not in the same pass. And because it spins up a new container for each, you cannot go like, okay, so I want this object by object identifier, because in the new database it doesn't exist because it's changing that stuff. I don't know exactly how it works, but you cannot get old objects into the new database.
What would be uh what questions do you ask yourself when you're thinking about a data model? Would you be like, yeah, SwiftData all the way, all the time, or where would you think SwiftData just where are the rough edges right now?
Mainly when you want to have like sharing support from NS persistent CloudKit container, that doesn't exist in SwiftData. I would say if you need like advanced compound predicates and everything, which I think iOS 27 will have. So that's quite nice, but at the same time, it's iOS 27 plus. So, right, older iOS versions won't have it. So you're going to have to probably figure out a way to use core data anyway. I would say like in a heavily multi-threaded environment as well, where you want to make use of scratch contexts, make sure that things run in the background. I found that you can do it with SwiftData. And I haven't been bitten by it yet, but I feel like SwiftData's model relies on trust a lot in the sense that you can pass your models to any thread, and the core data thread checker isn't going to fail on them. But I'm not exactly sure that your models are fully threat safe and sendable. And it all gets a little bit like it should work. I've been told that it should work. it's just core data has given me a lot of trust issues around these things. Like whenever they would say like with core data, just trust us, it'll work. It's like, I'm gonna be safe. I would say so. I don't trust either, but in core data, I have a way to like take control and to make sure that I know what I'm doing. SwiftData, on the other hand, they're like, oh no, this should work fine. Like this should be managed in the model container. Like core data has this annoying problem if you have a widget and an app, and they both operate on the same SQLite store, that you can easily get crashes when both want to write or both want to read because there's only supposed to be one connection active. SwiftData says you can do that now. So, I don't trust that because I have trust issues. Like I haven't had actual problems, but I have trust issues, right? Like core data bit me too many times with those kinds of things. And it's also like in SwiftData, there's bits and pieces scattered out there on like how it should work, but there's no like official guidance, especially on complex topics where you're like,
Would you go like with a SQLite type or SQLite adjacent library instead, or what's your position now? So like in my case, I don't want to keep going with SwiftData in my apps. Like I actually would want to migrate away from it, especially with Bushel. But maybe like there's a couple of apps which are fairly simple where SwiftData would make more sense, but I'm not like super happy with SwiftData and how it works. It's very Swift UI tied and not like database tied, I guess. I don't know how to put it. You know what I mean?
yeah, I get that. It's definitely a like UI abstraction over SwiftData in some way, over SQLite in many ways. Um, I, especially for a magazine, I don't hate it to the point where I would want to switch off of it. You know what I mean? Like it's fine. It's not causing me any problems. I don't have any performance issues with it.
There's no benefits to using core data with an app like Magazine either, right?
Like no benefits to switching to something like GRDB. Um, I did try GRDB in the beginning. Interestingly, because everybody told me like, oh, it's so much easier. Interestingly enough, I found it so much harder to use than SwiftData and Core Data. Maybe because I've been using both of those for such a long time that using something else to me felt like, oh, why would I have to relearn?
So my chief experience is with Fluent, which is the server side Swift library, and I'm used to that. So there was some adjustment to be made when I switched over to SwiftData, and I haven't done Core Data in at least a decade. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine like if you were to come from a more, it's like ORM style thing to SwiftData, which is like its own. It's not. I guess it's not technically an ORM. Like I think Core Data was pitched as like a graph management tool or something.
Right. It's like an abstraction layer. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can totally see like how that would be
Annoying.
hard to deal with.
Yeah.
When you're used to a certain level of control and a certain level of doing things.
Before we close out, I guess it's the second time I've said that maybe, but what's next for Donny? What kind of books should we expect, if any, in the next couple of years? And and additionally, I'm going to ask, was there anything out of Dub Dub that you were like, I want to write a book about that, or something that really caught your attention?
So I don't know. Like I started working on a SwiftData book, which I think I might not finish. I might finish. I have no idea right now where I'm at with that. So whether I'm going to do more books, I really don't know at this point. I think for me to do more books, the concurrency book has to sort of pick up again because that was in demand a lot, and then like somewhere in the last quarter of 2025, that sort of just took a nosedive, which very clearly says to me like people are not interested in learning the details of how this works. They want their agents to know the details, and there's skills out there that people can use. And I do feel like eventually people will come back from that because they have no idea what the agent is doing. Concurrency is really hard. Even with skills, it might still make poor decisions probably because the user doing a poor job explaining what they want. Um, so yeah, maybe we'll come back to that. So I have no idea. In terms of what's next, I'm still very heavily thinking like, what do I do next? I am dabbling like in indie apps, like sort of shipping my own stuff, which I chose like the hardest niche to get into, I think, which is health and fitness. But it's fun. I'm liking it a lot. So yeah, that's good. Um, Maybe other apps, maybe other ideas will come at some point. I have no idea. YouTube, I do want to like pick that up again, and I've been sort of putting that on hold as well while I like figure out like what am I going to do exactly content wise. I'm leaning more towards like maybe a live stream format where like just co-working, or like more workflow, higher level stuff, like not tutorials, not here's how to do X, or not here's how I like to do this UI part, or how I architect this. But a lot more high level, like how do I work with agents? Like how do I manage context windows? How do I describe architecture? How do I review code? How do I recognize when my agent's going off the rails? Those kinds of things. But I have
You
no
mean
idea
like
what the
off the
format is.
rails, like it's going crazy, not Ruby, right? I just
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
make that clear.
like
Okay.
how do I recognize that I should probably stop the agent mid task? Because like you can
Right,
just leave
right.
it running, and sometimes I do still think there's a ton of value in deeply understanding what the agent is doing in terms of how should the code look and what
There was a
files should it
way
change.
in Claude Code where you could have it tell you what it's thinking while it does something. And
Yeah,
I don't know if they got rid of it or it's no longer there. I need to re-enable it because it's really helpful for you to
I've
understand
used
what it's
that
thinking.
many times. Like I've used that. Like I've had that when you have your plan. Plan mode is great. Everything looks fine. The files it lists it. Like it looks good. Then it starts doing the work, and it's like, oh, we need to remove the old model version because there's a new model. It's like, no, no, don't remove anything. Don't do that. Do not remove anything. You're making new model versions. Model versions are additive, not destructive. And like if I had let that run, it could have spent like 30 minutes to an hour doing work, and then I come back, it's like, why does nothing work anymore?
Right, right. Yeah, thinking mode is what it's called.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, Donnie, let's do this again before the AI apocalypse or AI bubble. One or the other. We'll see. We'll flip a coin. We'll see which way it goes.
Something will happen.
Um, where can people find you online?
On X, Donny Wals. On I think Mastodon, also Donny Wals. On all the social networks, just find Donny Wals. And if you cannot find me by Donny Wals, find me by Donny Wals Dev, which I think is what I had to use on Instagram, because somebody stole Donny Wals, and they're not
And
even a Donny
what
Wals.
does that what does that Donnie Walls do? Do you know?
Steal my stuff.
Oh man,
Like literally,
imprac
I tried
impractical
many
combined.
times. No, so what they did is they posted like some weird picture, then like three pictures that they stole on my page, and then one other picture, and then they haven't posted for like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah. Okay.
And every once
Got
in a
it. A
while, I write to
squatter.
Instagram like, yeah, I write them like, hey, that's my name, that's my
Yeah. Right.
photos, and they ended up taking down my photos, but they're like, yeah, well, nothing we can do about them using your name. So there you go.
What?
They're not even
Meta.
using the
Come on.
account. Like it
Really?
sucks. Yeah.
Thank you again for coming on the show. It was fantastic. People can find me online at LeoGDon at LeoGDon.c.im on Mastodon. YouTube, we're at Bright Digit is the name of the channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe, and also like and subscribe to Donnie's channel too. If you're on a podcast player, please go ahead and post a review. I'd really appreciate it. Oh, one more thing. I have a newsletter again. Yay. I'm going to post a link to the newsletter. I finally moved from MailChimp to Button Down, and it's a lot nicer. So definitely check that out. And check out the Patreon. Thank you to Patreon supporters like Steve Lipton for helping support the show. Oh, right. So I'm going to be installing Windows and learning about Windows. I haven't touched Windows in over 12 years. So if you have any questions for Salim, the I don't know, founder, principal motivator of Swift for Windows, drop me a line and let me know what you want me to ask him because he'll be in the next episode. We'll be talking about that story. Thank you again, and I look forward to talking to you again. Bye, everybody.